Well, a very good evening to all my dear students and to all the viewers and listeners who are tuned into this program. I would like to welcome you to this English class for class 10. I'm Ms. Vivekunyo and I'll be taking up your English for today. Okay, before we get into the lesson, I would just like to give you a little bit that is outside the topic. English, as we all know, is quite vast, but today I've selected the prose section because it's always good to start with a story, and I know every one of us are interested, and I'm also feeling privileged for this platform that the department has set up for each and every one of us. I believe all the students out there would be making the utmost benefit out of this program. And I'm really happy to welcome each and every listeners. If you have just tuned in, I'm reminding you that it's our English class for the class 10. And I'm starting with the prose section. And also, when I say the prose section, I have literally picked up the lesson Imitating the English Gentleman. I repeat, Imitating the English Gentleman of page number 46 from a textbook. Our lesson covers page number 46 till page number 50. So if you're at home with your books, I would like you to refer into the books if there's anything that you would like to refer. And starting with English, we consider it the easiest subject, but sometimes we take it for granted. So I'm feeling proud to be teaching the easiest subject that we all consider it. So when we are studying the easiest, we should also be giving our full attention to it. And here, with Imitating the English Gentleman, a brief history about the story. It is about our father of the nation, we all know Mahatma Gandhi. He has written a book that is his autobiography called My Experiments with Truth. And this story is an extract from that particular book. And here, Imitating the English Gentleman, we are going to learn about how he starts imitating others in order to cope up with the lifestyles of the Englishman when he was still a student in England. By the word imitating, we all know it means to imitate somebody. It means to copy somebody in their lifestyles, be it in the way of talking, be it in their food habit. But here we are going to discuss mainly about the lifestyles. To begin with, Gandhiji went to England for his studies of law. He went there so that he can learn something about the law, but in the process he also got distracted from his main work that he has to do in England. And here we see that he had started developing an interest for the studies of vegetarian diet, and when he read the book written by Mr. Salt, it whetted his desire. Whetted here, it means to sharpen himself. His desire for the book of dietetic studies began to grow more and more. Once he read the book that was written by Salt, we see that he began to give more and more interest in the studies of diet. And when I say diet, it means the food habit that one follows. Now, when he came into this, he also found out some other books. He went in for all sorts of books that are available, and he went on to see a book that was written by Howard Williams. It is about the dietetic studies. It deals with studies about the philosophers and the prophets in the ancient times till the present day. So here when he began to study these things, he began to realize the benefits of vegetarianism. Vegetarianism is the habit of taking only vegetable diet, and we also see that he began to give his interest more and more into this, forgetting that his mainstay in England was to continue with his studies, that is the study of law. And here he found out that he is giving a lot of time into his dietetic studies, and in the book of Howard Williams, he learned that great philosophers and prophets like from Pythagoras down to Jesus, they were all vegetarians. This gave him a lot of encouragement. We also find that when we find somebody who is of high status, if they are following a particular lifestyle, we feel that we also want to go in that line, because we all have the tendency, as a human being, we all have the tendency to follow some persons who are at a higher level, because we tend to feel that we will also become like them if we continue to follow what they have been following. And so when it came to this dietetic studies, his interest in the dietetic studies were so intense that he began to search for more and more books. The other book that he that he got into was Dr. Anna Kingsford, that is about health and hygiene. He also began to study this book, and he got the benefits of what a person, or of what a person gets the benefit from this. And he also went into, for books that were written by doctors, they were suggesting the vegetarian diet for their patients, and he found out all this to be very beneficial. And at first, the study for these vegetarian books were mostly because of his health concern. He began to take on these books, and also not only into reading, but practically he got himself involved. Now he had been avoiding all sorts of food that were non-veg, and so his main focus was to stay healthy. But later on, this attention drifted from being health conscious to from health to religion. So we know that there are some religions who really stresses on following the vegetarian diet. And so with all this in mind, starting from his health consciousness to his religion conscious, he began to follow vegetarian diet very strictly. But in this process, he also had a friend like all of us. At school, I know you all have very good friends. If a friend tells you something, you always want to follow that. But there are times that you don't want to shift your attention, but you also want to compensate for whatever you do. And so Gandhiji tried to please his friend. He's trying to please his friend in the best possible way, even though he is following a very strict vegetarian diet. His friend was concerned because he was staying in England. And in England, most of the people are non-veg, and so his friend was concerned because he felt that his friend Gandhiji would be left out all alone in the group if he continues with this strict diet system. And so he tried to convince him in so many ways, but Gandhiji does not want to get shifted from this focus. And so he tried to please his friend in so many different areas. And here we will see our father of the nation, when he was still a student, he was also getting distracted from what he should be doing. And here, what I want all of us to recollect and rethink here is that sometimes in the process of running after our goals, we also tend to get shifted. And when you face those, I'm requesting everyone here not to get disappointed. Even the greatest of leaders, see the life of Mahatma Gandhi, who became a very great leader in his later life, who began to work for the freedom struggle. We have seen that even he, at one point of time, he had been distracted from his studies. But later on, we will get into that again. Later on, he also got a realization that things should not be going this way, and that is the reason why he made a turning point. And here, in the process of running after a particular goal that we have all set, I know that at one point or the other, in all this life, from your nursery till this class 10, I'm sure some of you might be regretting a lot. But I'm reminding every one of us, including me, you might have gone astray in some ways, but there is always a time to make a right decision in every field that you are in. If you are just to give up when you have made a mistake or when you have gone out of what you are supposed to be doing, that does not mean that you have to be disappointed and stay there. Everyone makes this, but no matter how many times you have been drifting away from your regular work, that is not the main thing that we should be concentrating, but the thing that is important is we should always come back to whatever we have set in. I know a lot of us here during this lockdown, we all are sometimes getting detached from our books. I know there are a lot of students who are with their books every time, even at home, with the proper guidance of their parents, with or without the guidance. Some of you are still with your book. But if you are that person that is getting detached from your books, I am requesting and I'm calling you all again to get into this. We should not take this for granted, and I believe that this is a system. The way that we are teaching right now is not the traditional method of teaching, but I find it more beneficial for the students Because here you are free to be sitting in front of your screens, and you are still free to make any movements unlike the normal traditional classroom. So we should also adapt ourselves to this conventional method that has been introduced. And here, when we get ourselves adapted, no matter wherever you are, learning cannot be stopped. If you are at home, for some of you, I know it's very convenient to be with your books right now, watching this program. And so in this process, you will get the most out of this. Because sometimes in the classroom, your friends tend to distract you, but we should also remember this. And so when Gandhiji's friend, coming back to the lesson, when Gandhiji's friend was trying to convert his friend back to the non-veg fooding system, Gandhiji was not willing. Maybe he was a very stubborn fellow, even at the young age. And so he did not realize it. His friend was trying to convince him again and again, but finding that his friend will not be very easily convinced, he tried a trick. Okay, he tried to invite him to a theater. They wanted to go and watch a movie maybe. And so, or maybe he just wanted to take Gandhiji there for another purpose, which I'm not telling you right now. And so he invited his friend Gandhiji, and they decided to go to the theater. But before that, there is a thing that they're still going to do, and that is they were to dine at a very big restaurant, that is the Holborn restaurant. Imagine. So Gandhiji must be coming out with all excitement because he's going with one of his best friend, and also they were to dine at a restaurant before going to the theater. And Gandhiji, for him, he does not visit these posh restaurants much. The only big hotel that he had attended was Victoria. And apart from that, he had never gone to any posh restaurants, but his friend had decided, maybe because he thought that modesty. See, when we are in a group of very high profile people, we all tend to behave ourselves in a certain way. And so Gandhiji's friend was expecting the same thing from his friend, that is Gandhi. He tried to get him there because he was also worried, not only because he would be left out in the whole society, but he was also worried for his health. We all see, a lot of us here believe that taking a non-veg diet would be more nutritious. We believe that if we are taking only the vegetarian diet, it would affect our health. So Gandhiji's friend might also have thought about this. Let's reconsider our place here. And so, if there is a person in the group that is always having a different diet, I'm sure you don't really feel good to be with them. Or sometimes you feel for them, you feel pity for them, and you don't even want to hang out along with those friends who are always into a different thing, different from what the group usually does or what the gang usually does. Let's all consider this. And so Gandhiji does not want his friend to go through all this humiliation. Maybe sometimes he will also be humiliated for being different. He would remain a different person in the society, and we all know how it feels to be different. When the whole classroom is following a particular thing and you start doing a different thing, even your teachers don't like it, that's for sure. You might have noticed this a lot of times in your classroom. You are always the odd one out. Imagine that. You don't feel good, your friends don't feel good to be with you, and I also don't want to go out with a person who is always thinking different sometimes. That is a very normal thing for all of us. But here, so in his bid to transform his friend, he invited to the restaurant. As they were seated among a very big group of high-profile diners, he ordered the food. Gandhiji's friend ordered the food, and when the first course of food was served, that was soup. And Gandhiji's friend was just observing. He might be thinking that his friend will not ask any questions in such a big group. But our friend Gandhiji did not bother to worry for the persons that are seated around him. And so, across the table, his friend saw him summoning. His friend saw Gandhiji calling out to the waiter. And so he wanted to know what he really is doing. And so across the table, he asked his friend what he was trying to do. And Gandhiji told him that he wanted to inquire if the soup was made of vegetarian or non-vegetarian. At this, his friend became furious. and irritated, that's for sure. If you take your friend to a very good restaurant where everyone is so modestly behaved, imagine you acting the odd one out. And I'm sure, as for me, I will not have the courage or the guts to do that. But Gandhiji did not lose anything there. He really wanted to go on with his strict vegetarian diet, and so he is trying to encourage again. At this thought, his friend became angry, and so they had a friendly tussle here, a friendly argument. I'm sure you all have arguments with your friends. I also had a lot of arguments, even at the school when I was still a student. Sometimes we argue a lot, and then the next day everything becomes normal. And that is all a part of students' life. We tend to argue a lot, and then sometimes we also reach that point where we would pick up a fight. Those things are very normal. But when there is true friendship between people, true friendship will never fail you. No matter how much you quarrel or you argue with your friend, those are very normal for you because you have the understanding that is from within. And we all have that one person who we always argue with. But that one person is the one who is always there for us in our troubled times again. And so Gandhiji is so lucky to have found a friend like that abroad. He's not in India. I want you all to remember this. He is not studying in India. He went to England for his studies. And in all this, his friend was trying his best. Imagine, that is a very, very good relationship between them. And so in this argument, his friend said, if you cannot behave yourself here, you would better go out and dine in some vegetarian restaurant. When he said that, maybe he did not mean that Gandhiji would leave that place immediately. But to his surprise, his friend did not hesitate. Gandhiji did not hesitate to move out of the restaurant when his friend said that. If I were you, or if I were in that position, or if you were in that position, just imagine. When everything was ordered, your friend told something and then you walking out of the place. I think even if we don't like it, maybe we would just sit in the place pretending that everything was normal, because you walking out in the middle would be an awkward thing to do. But he did not hesitate here. We can see the simplicity in his nature. Whatever he says, he does it, even from a young age. And while he was still there, his friend just told him very plainly that he had to move out of the restaurant if he cannot behave himself in such a place. Gandhiji just said all of a sudden he went out, and he was more than happy. In our situation, we would feel awkward. He was more than happy to do this. So he went, because he knew that there was a vegetarian restaurant outside near the theater. So he thought he would wait for his friend there. When he went out, unfortunately, he found out that that restaurant was closed. Imagine your only hope of finding a restaurant being closed. So he was just there still waiting for his friend. He was there, he had to wait for his friend to finish his dinner, and while he was still waiting, a lot of thoughts might be going in his mind. And when his friend finished, he came out, but they did not make any conversation about this restaurant being closed. He was still waiting there, and Gandhiji did not even tell his friend that he went without food that night. He went without any food. He went there in the hope of having a very good dinner at Holborn restaurant, but that was not possible. So he went out with the hope of finding another restaurant nearby that was also closed. They went to the theater, and after that incident, they never uttered any word about their friendly tussle that had taken place. But that did not stop their friendship. Sometimes, in the process of our argument, we tend to get drifted from our friendship. Or sometimes, even if we don't say it verbally, within, we get hurt and we do not want to continue that friendship. We may speak to them in a very polite manner in some ways, but we also know that deep inside we are hurt. We do not want to continue this relationship. It will never be the same for many of us after having an argument. But even after this argument, Gandhiji's respect for his friend grew more and more. Why? Because he knew that his friend was doing all this in order to make him comfortable, because he knew that his friend knew that if Gandhiji persisted in his restrictions to meat eating, he would not only develop a weak constitution but also remain a duffer in the whole society, a person who is left out, a person who is rejected. And he realized what his friend's motive actually was. And this is all because his friend was really concerned for him. And his respect for his friend continued to grow more and more after this incident. But Gandhiji also kept something in mind. And that is, he tried to please his friend in some other ways, even if he does not want to change his fooding habit. That is one thing that he kept in his mind. And here, when he continued with living in England, he realized that he needed to change his clothing style. See, clothing style is something that we are very concerned when it comes to our younger days. And here, he decided to dress like an English gentleman. He wanted to be like one of those English gentlemen who wears suits, who wears ties. And then, so what he planned out here was, in order to compensate for his vegetarian diet, Gandhiji was beginning to realize that he should do something to make his friend feel at ease as long as he stays here in England. So he decided to change his way of clothing. At first, he might have brought some different kinds of clothes that is from India, and so he tried to replace the Bombay cut clothes with the new ones that are obtained from the army and navy stores. Those were considered to be one of the most fashionable stores in the whole of London. And here, while he was planning out all these things, he tried to replace the clothing styles, the ones that he procured from Bombay, the present Mumbai. So the ones that he brought from Bombay, he considered them to be outdated or old-fashioned. So he replaced them. He went for an evening suit made in Bond Street. That must be a very expensive suit at that time. And so he went for it. He also tried to part his hair in the correct fashion, and also he learned the art of tying his necktie. All these things are that he did, not just to make himself feel comfortable, but also because he wanted to make his friend feel at ease as long as he stays with him in England. So he began to change himself. See, this is where his attention was being shifted from his regular studies to the clothing style that he is making. And so, when he was in the process of changing his clothing style, it was also a bit expensive. He began to order one after the other. He got, as I've mentioned earlier, he ordered his noble-hearted brother to send him a double watch chain of gold. Imagine a chain of gold, a watch of gold, and his brother was willing to send it. And so when his brother sent it, that was also an addition to his style of clothing. And he also attained a chimney pot hat. That chimney pot hat was considered to be a very fashionable hat during those days, and so he's trying all his best in his reformation just for the sake of pleasing his friend. And later on, this became a normal clothing style for him. You can all imagine the father of the nation who is normally not seen in suits, wearing a coat, wearing a chimney pot hat, and all those accessories. And also, he thought that wearing a ready-made tie would not be enough. He considered that to be out of the standard. And so he also began the art of tying his own necktie, which was difficult for him at first. And after attaining all the clothes that are required, he began to give his his focus on his hairstyle. His hair was by no means soft. We all think that our father of the nation never had hairs, but he had a very thick hair. And so he had to stand in front of the mirror 10 to 15 minutes every day, arranging his hair, arranging his tie, and parting his hair in the correct fashion. And every time he goes out in the society, they normally remove their head in order to give respect while greeting others. And so every time the hands went up to remove, the other hand would just go up very quickly to part his hair in the correct fashion. Because having a rough hair, you can imagine, having a hard hair, it would be difficult for you to keep it in place. And so these are all the struggles that he had been going through. He had been doing. And while he was still in India, to have a mirror was a luxury in those days. For us, we stand in the mirror every morning. It's a very normal thing for us, but his situation was a different one. During his time, then, mirrors were considered to be luxury. And that is also only for the well-to-dos. If you can afford a mirror, that's a luxury, and you would be proud of it, I'm sure, if you were to be living in that era. And so, when the family barber comes, you know who is a barber. A barber is a person who cuts the hair. And so, when the family barber comes in for the family haircut, that means the whole of the family gets the haircut on the same day, unlike the modern days. And so when the family barber comes into their family, into their home, he usually brings a mirror, that is for sure. And so they get to look at the mirror once in a week while he was still in India. But here in England, every morning he was standing in front of a huge mirror, parting his hair. I can really imagine the hair that Mahatma Gandhi had. So he would be parting his hair in the correct fashion, arranging his tie, all these things. And unknowingly, when he removes his hair, his cap, his hat to greet people, the hand would automatically, unplanned, but it would just go up to arrange the hair that has to be parted in the correct fashion. All these things went on. But let us all remind ourselves once again that he went to England for his studies of law, and studying law in England means your motive also has to be to join the Inns of Court. There are 4 Inns of Court: the Inner Temple, the Middle Temple, Gray's Inn, and so on. And those 4 Inns of Court are considered to be the standard court that if you are an advocate, you have to join them in order to practice in order to practice as an advocate. And so his main motive should be this one, but he had been drifting away. Finding these things not sufficient enough, he tried to go for a dancing lesson too. Dancing. And so in order to cultivate his habit of dancing, he found the Western dance to be too difficult for him. And so what he did next was he took music, because he had to develop an ear for Western music. If you are going to dance on a music which you have never heard, it's going to be difficult, that's for sure. That's very practical for all of us to know. And so when he was still going for the dance class, he found out that his dance class would be impossible without having knowledge on the Western music. He also went for music class, that is the violin. He procured a violin, spending all the money on the violin again, and then he also thought this is not enough, so he went for French and elocution. Why French while he was still in England? Is because French was the lingua franca, that means the common language. Like for Nagaland, we have our English and Nagamese, which is the lingua franca. Everybody can understand it. And so French was also the lingua franca of so many countries that he wished to visit. That means he had been making plans to visit some countries. But unless you know the language of that particular country, it would be difficult for you to travel to those places. Imagine having a guide every time when you travel around. That would be an extra burden and also very expensive. So he went for French and elocution. He thought that he would take French. That would be very helpful, because French is not only the language of France, like I said. It is the lingua franca of so many countries that he wished to visit. And elocution is the art of learning how to speak in the correct way in the public, standing in public. So those are the things that he began to go on, forgetting that his motive here in England was to go on with the study of law. And going on with all this, he felt like it was like the story of the recluse, the hermit who went to the jungle. Okay, that is not really important, but I'm just going to illustrate a little bit. And a hermit went to the forest to have a quiet time. When he went there, he found that the rats are disturbing him. In order to keep the rats away, he also had to bring the cat. And when he brought the cat, he needed milk, and to give milk to the cat, since he cannot go down to the market every day, he had to keep a cow and then a person to look after the cow, and then it went on like that. And so he was also realizing that his story became like the recluse who had been running one after the other in order to manage or in order to keep the rats away. This is what he had been doing. And so he found that he had been running one after the other. And so he decided, now when his elocution teacher told him to buy, recommended a book that is Bell's Standard Elocutionist. That book was recommended by his elocution teacher, and when he started reading the book, Bell's Standard Elocutionist rang the bell of alarm in his ears. It's like he suddenly woke up from his sleep, and then he realized that he is running after all the wrong things. And if he really wanted to be an English gentleman, he realized that it's the character that makes a gentleman and not the way of living, the styles, the clothing, and whatever styles he had been following. So he decided to give up all this. He went to all his teachers one after the other. He went to his violin teacher and he wrote letters to some of the teachers stating his desire, stating his wish to quit all these classes. And his teachers were good enough. They also encouraged him. Instead of asking questions why he wanted to quit, they all encouraged him to go on with whatever he had planned. As he had come to England for his studies, now they reminded him that he should, and they are also happy at the same time, not only encouraging him, but they were happy that he had made a firm determination. And so he left all this music class, the elocution class, and the dance and French classes. And at the time, the clothing sense and the new habits of lifestyle that he had developed continued for some years. But he left all this music and the dance classes, finally realizing his main purpose. So what I want all of us, including me, and all the viewers here and the listeners, to know is there might be a point of time when you have been drifted away from the main focus of your goal. In those moments, I want all of us to come back and then get into what we have to do, especially for the students. I know there will be some students who are really sincere with their books, but there will be some who had been drifted away from the lessons, from the normal school works, because you are not going to school anymore. But I believe that you will come back realizing what your main motive here is. And here, it's going to be a little difficult for you at first because it's uncomfortable. You had the habit of sitting in the classroom every day listening to your teachers. But I'm reminding to you once again that staying at home and studying is more comfortable. There are times when you don't want to go to school, but you had to force yourself to come out of your house in order to reach school. But now there is no one to force us like that. You can take the best time of your day for a particular subject and then at your convenience. And now you're just sitting comfortably in front of your screens with your books, with or without your books. No one is there to scold you. And that is the reason why we should be happy with this. I'm not saying we should be happy with the situation, but we are at the comforts of our home. And that is the reason why we should take the most out of it. Like I said, English, we will be touching all the important sections. But for today, with this, I want to wind up our classes, but I'm expecting to see you in the next class. If there is anything that you need to know more, your textbooks are there, or maybe you can take the help of someone at home to guide you in everything that you do. Till then, I'm wishing all of you to be safe at home, and thank you all so much for tuning in.